Extra, extra, read all about it. Hot off the press. Breaking news. It's the latest. Read the world's fastest newspaper. Yep, if you've lived 80 years ago, you'd be hearing these phrases. And you've probably heard of all them newspapers too. USA Today, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times. All these newspapers may be big-time names, but nowadays that may be changing. We've got radio, television, the internet, all modern, sleek, and shiny. However, the way we've gotten the news has changed over the centuries, not to mention the level of access to information people have gotten all over the world. Believe it or not, it was the Romans who started up the whole business of recorded news. Ever since civilization began, people started carving into stone tablets, hieroglyphs, symbols, alphabets. The Romans got the bright idea not only just to use them to record history, but to tell people what the latest story was all about.
Oh, yeah.
This lasted up until the fall of the Roman Empire. I guess that's why some papers are called the tabloid. Now, people in the days of medieval Europe would get their latest news from whatever the town crier had to say. Hear ye, yada yada yada. This was because most people in those days couldn't read or write. But if you were able to read or write, you would have to be a noble or an upperclassman in order to get an education on such things. In order to write and illustrate all those fancy medieval books you might find in museums, monasteries had these special rooms called a scriptorium. Scribes would painstakingly measure out and outline the page layouts and carefully copy the text from another book in total silence. And the illuminators would add all them fancy embellishments and illustrations. I tell you, it must have been very uncomfortable. We still would have been writing everything down by hand, and it would have been a miracle to get your hands on a book if Johann Gutenberg hadn't come up with a totally new and revolutionary device. So this guy is desperate for money. When he saw how the books were copied in his day, he looked for an alternative. Now, paper had just been imported from China, along with the technique for carving letters into blocks of wood. Gutenberg decided that the blocks could be evenly spaced out, and within a certain layout, cover the blocks with some ink and pressed automatically with some kind of machine, then books could be reproduced a heck of a lot faster. The problem was, however, that the wood blocks would crack under pressure. So instead, Gutenberg used metal blocks which he minted the letters into. Bingo! Although it was Gutenberg's personal secret to success, it soon spread out across Germany, in Italy, and everywhere in Europe. Before, there were only handwritten newsletters that only merchants informed about wars, economic conditions, social customs, etc. With the new press, not only were books reproduced at a more rapid pace, but newspapers were among the biggest things to come hot off the press. Very soon, the press and the papers soon spread to the colonies in America. In 1800, the Gutenberg Press got an overhaul by becoming completely made in cast iron. However, it was superseded by more mechanical presses like the bed and platen presses. The cylinder and rotary presses were an incredible step up because they could create up to 4,000 copies in an hour. But the news industry wasn't satisfied, and soon the Bullock press was developed in 1865. This press could create up to 12,000, then 300 copies an hour. All that had to be done was thread roll paper through a series of cylinders and rotary presses before a serrated knife cut where the paper started and ended. 1989 saw the end of sorting out letter blocks by hand with the advent of the linotype machine. It was like a typewriter, and each keystroke created a perforated tape which could be run into a casting machine to create the letters. If a mistake was made, it could simply be retyped instead of sorting out the whole line of text. Despite these advances in printing technology, it was rendered obsolete with the invention of the radio in 1895 and the television in 1927. These devices became extremely popular in the 30s and 40s. They could deliver information live over the airwaves. Yet by the end of the 20th century, the news industry found themselves a new niche, one we couldn't imagine life without: the internet in the 1990s. However, there are so many internet articles and web blogs that it's almost impossible to tell which is fact from fiction. A word to the wise: cross-check the sources and study the tones of what you read. that they don't have an agenda contrary to what they're supposed to report, and make sure they are consistent to what's really going on out there.